I texted the family group chat about my graduation. No one even replied. They chose a Vegas trip instead, told me don't make this about you, then panicked that night when my graduation ended up all over the news. My name's Alex, I'm 23, and last Saturday was supposed to be one of the biggest milestones of my life, my college graduation. For years of pulling all-nighters, juggling two part-time jobs, living on instant noodles, and constantly telling myself it would all be worth it. I was the first in my family to even make it to college, let alone graduate. I thought that would mean something to them. A week before the ceremony, I texted the family group chat. My graduation's on Saturday. Hope you can make it. I'd already sent them the official invite months earlier, but I figured this was a gentle reminder. I watched the typing bubbles appear, then vanish, then reappear. My brother Matt finally replied, "We'll be in Vegas, maybe next time. No congratulations. No sorry, we can't make it. Just Vegas." My chest tightened, but before I could even respond, my mom chimed in, "Don't make this about you." I just stared at the screen for a few seconds, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could have argued. I could have begged. Instead, I simply typed understood. That word understood felt like swallowing glass. It wasn't that I was shocked. Matt's been the golden child since we were kids, the one who could crash Dad's car and still be praised for learning responsibility. I've always been the afterthought, the one who was too sensitive, too serious, too dramatic. But still a part of me had held on to the hope that this day of all days would be different, that they'd show up, smile, take pictures, maybe even say they were proud. I put my phone down and sat there in the quiet of my apartment. The blinds were half closed, letting in strips of late afternoon sunlight that felt far too warm for how cold my chest felt. I knew my family wasn't perfect. I'd accepted that years ago, but this was different. This was them telling me in no uncertain terms that my accomplishment didn't matter, that I didn't matter. It's funny how little moments from childhood can flash in your mind when you're hurt. I remembered the time I was 12 and won a regional art competition. My mom didn't come to the award ceremony because Matt had a baseball game one he didn't even play in because he was resting his arm. I remembered sitting in the auditorium, clutching my certificate and scanning the crowd for a face that never appeared. That same hollow feeling crept in now, wrapping around my ribs like a vice. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that I had friends who'd be there, professors who believed in me, and that I'd built this achievement on my own. But the truth was, a part of me still craved their approval. That gnawing ache of wanting them to care. It never really went away. The days leading up to graduation felt heavier than I expected. I'd be at work folding clothes in the back of the store, and suddenly I'd picture my family laughing in Vegas while I walked across the stage. I'd open Instagram and see Matt's wife posting, "Can't wait for our trip," but with pictures of luggage and champagne flutes. I didn't even want to open the group chat anymore. Every unread message felt like a stone in my stomach. By Friday night, the reality had set in. They weren't coming. No last minute we changed our minds. No surprise appearance. My dad hadn't even replied to my text. And yet, in some strange way, their absence started to feel freeing. If they weren't going to be there, then this day wasn't about them at all. It would be mine. Mine to remember, mine to own. What I didn't know then was that while they were packing for Vegas, something else was brewing in the background. Something that would pull their attention away from slot machines and poolside cocktails, something that would make them wish they'd been anywhere but where they were. And it all started with a single phone call I didn't expect to get that night. The call came just after 8 p.m. Friday night. I was sitting at my kitchen table trying to iron my gown without scorching it when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Aunt Lisa. She's my mom's older sister, the family member who's always been sort of on the outside like me. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she never played into my parents' little hierarchy. We'd talk once in a blue moon, usually, when she caught wind of something she thought I should know. I answered, and after the usual small talk, her voice dropped lower. "Alex, I just thought you should know what they've been saying about you." It was like a stone dropped in my stomach. Apparently, while I'd been counting down the days to graduation, my mom had been telling anyone who'd listened that I was making too big a deal about it and acting like graduating is some huge accomplishment. She told relatives I'd been milking my degree for attention and that it was sad how much I wanted people to come. Matt, of course, had added his usual brand of charm, saying that I shouldn't expect the whole family to drop everything for something everyone does. I felt my throat tighten. It wasn't enough for them not to show up. They had to make sure no one else thought it mattered either. Lisa must have sensed my silence because she quickly added, "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you and I'll be there tomorrow." Front row. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, my chest buzzing with a mix of anger and resignation. I thought about the time Matt got promoted to assistant manager at his job, a job my dad had pulled strings to get him, and my parents threw him a backyard party with balloons, catered food, and a slideshow. I remembered how they'd posted about it all over Facebook, calling him an inspiration. I remembered how when I got accepted into my college program, my mom's first comment had been, "That's nice, but you know it's going to be expensive." Saturday morning, I woke up earlier than I needed to. The sky was still pale with dawn, the city quiet except for the occasional whoosh of a passing car. I made coffee and sat in silence, letting the bitterness in my cup match the bitterness in my chest. I checked the group chat out of habit. Nothing from them. But Matt had posted on his Instagram story a selfie at the airport bar, drink in hand, captioned, Vegas. My mom was tagged in a picture of her holding a mimosa, beaming like it was the happiest day of her life. At the ceremony, Lisa kept her word. She sat in the front row, waving like a proud parent when I walked across the stage. I smiled for the cameras, but the whole time there was this quiet hum in the back of my mind, a reminder that the people who should have been there most were hundreds of miles away, spending money they didn't have in a city that didn't care about them. Afterward, Lisa insisted on taking me out to lunch. We found a small cafe near campus. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. We laughed, we shared dessert, she asked questions about my plans, and actually listened to the answers. I didn't realize how badly I needed that until I had it. But just as we were finishing up, my phone started buzzing on the table. It was my mom, then Matt, then my dad. Call after call, one right after the other. I just stared at the screen confused. Vegas was 3 hours behind us. It was still morning there. Something in my gut told me this wasn't about them suddenly realizing they'd made a mistake. Something had happened. I let it go to voicemail, but the text started pouring in. Call me now. Where are you? You need to see the news. I could feel my pulse in my ears. Lisa noticed my expression and leaned in her voice low. Alex, what's going on? I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the first text, my mind racing, and then like a ripple before a wave. I caught the first glimpse of what had just turned their entire Vegas trip upside down. The first text that made my stomach flip wasn't even from my mom or Matt. It was from my cousin Jenna. We aren't especially close, but she's one of those people who always seems to know what's going on before anyone else. Her message was short. You're not going to like what you see. Channel 5. I opened the live stream on my phone, my heart already pounding. The camera showed a shaky shot of flashing police lights outside what looked like a hotel entrance. The news ticker at the bottom scrolled in big block letters. Police raid strip hotel. Multiple detained in luxury suite. The anchor's voice was calm but had that edge reporters get when they know they've got a big story. I almost dropped my phone when I saw the next frame. It was grainy but clear enough. Matt in his stupid Vegas shirt being led through the lobby by 2 officers. Behind him, my mom was half covering her face with her hand, and my dad was arguing with someone just outside the shot. Lisa leaned closer. Is that... I nodded slowly, my throat tightening. Yep, that's them. But as shocking as it was to see my family on the news for what the anchor was now calling an investigation into fraudulent casino activities, it wasn't the part that broke me. That came 5 minutes later when the reporter explained how the police had been tipped off. They were reportedly using a stolen credit card belonging to a local college graduate who had reported suspicious charges earlier this week. The anchor said, "It took me a second to process. Local college graduate reported suspicious charges. My brain made the leap, but my mouth still said it out loud as if hearing it would make it more real. They used my card. I'd had my debit card skimmed once before, so at first I thought maybe it was just bad luck. But when I pulled up my bank app, the pit in my stomach turned into something heavier, something hot like anger. There it was clear as day. A $1,200 charge at a luxury Vegas hotel processed the day before. My card, the same one I'd been using to scrape together the last of my tuition payments. My hands shook as I scrolled back through my transactions. There were more. Dinner at a high-end restaurant, spa services, even a helicopter tour. My parents didn't have that kind of money, and neither did Matt. And then I remembered something that made my skin crawl. A week earlier, Mom had called asking for my new address so she could send me a graduation gift. She'd been weirdly insistent about me reading the numbers off my mailbox when I said I wasn't sure of the exact format. I'd brushed it off at the time, thinking she was just being her usual controlling self. But now I realize she must have been fishing for information to reset my online banking security. Lisa must have read it on my face. They stole from you, didn't they? I could only nod. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest. Heavier than their absence, heavier than the years of favoritism. This wasn't just them being dismissive or selfish. This was deliberate planned. They hadn't just skipped my graduation. They'd used it as an opportunity to fund their Vegas getaway with my money. I sat there in that cafe, the sounds of clinking cups and low chatter blurring around me. My mom's texts kept coming in, alternating between frantic demands and fainted concern. Alex, you have to answer. We need to talk about this. They're making it look worse than it is. And then the final gut punch Matt's message, which I opened without thinking. Don't blow this out of proportion. We'll pay you back eventually. Family sticks together. That was the moment something inside me hardened. Whatever thread had kept me tethered to the idea of family loyalty snapped clean. This wasn't loyalty, it was exploitation dressed up as obligation. And they had just handed me every reason I needed to stop playing the part they'd assigned me since childhood. But before I could even decide what to do next, another notification lit up my phone. One that would turn all this simmering anger into a plan I hadn't even considered before. The notification wasn't from my family this time. It was from my bank, a fraud alert. I already knew what it would say, but reading it made my chest feel like it was caving in. Multiple suspicious transactions detected. Account temporarily frozen. Please contact us. Frozen. That one word was enough to make my stomach twist. I'd been counting on that account to cover rent next week, my phone bill, and the last payment on my student loan before the interest kicked back in. Without it, I had maybe $40 in cash and a small emergency fund that wouldn't last a week. I excused myself from the table, muttering something to Lisa about needing a second, and stepped outside. The air felt heavier now, the late afternoon warmth sticking to my skin as I called the bank. I went through the endless menu options, explained the situation to a tired-sounding representative, and listened as she told me it could take up to 10 business days for the investigation to resolve. 10 days. 10 days of not knowing if I'd be able to pay my bills, buy groceries, or even get to work if I needed gas. I felt this dull, hollow ache in my chest. Not panic exactly, just a heavy weight pressing down on me. When I hung up, I just stood there on the sidewalk staring at nothing. It wasn't just the financial hit that hurt. It was knowing they'd done this, knowing full well how close I was to the edge. They'd watched me struggle through school, working nights and weekends, skipping meals to make rent. And still they'd taken. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a fog. Lisa offered to help, even tried to insist on paying my rent until the account was fixed, but I couldn't bring myself to say yes. I didn't want another person to swoop in and save me. I wanted to fix this myself, even if I didn't yet know how. That night, I sat in my apartment, the silence so thick it felt like it was pressing in on me. The graduation cap sat on my kitchen counter, the tassel tangled like it couldn't quite fall into place. I thought about throwing it in a drawer, maybe even in the trash. What was the point of celebrating when the people who should have been there had turned it into the worst day of my life? I let myself sink into that low place for a while. I didn't answer calls, didn't look at texts, didn't post anything online. I figured if my family wanted me so badly, they could sit with their own panic for a while. But in the middle of that stillness, something started to shift. Maybe it was the bitterness settling into clarity, or maybe it was the fact that I'd finally stopped expecting them to change. Either way, I started seeing things differently. They'd taken from me, yes. They'd humiliated me, yes, but they'd also handed me something without realizing it. Proof. Proof of what they were willing to do, how far they'd go, and how little they thought of me. And proof in the right hands could be powerful. I opened my laptop not to post on social media, not to rant, but to start collecting everything. Bank statements, screenshots of their messages, even the video clip from the news site. I didn't know exactly where this was headed yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this slide. If they thought I'd just absorb the hit and keep quiet for the sake of family, they were about to find out I'd learned something very different in my years away from them. Silence can be a weapon too if you know how to use it, and I was ready to start sharpening it. The first few days after graduation, I kept my head down. I went to work, came home, and quietly built my case. Every evening, I'd sit at my desk with my laptop and a mug of tea, combing through transaction logs and saving screenshots. My phone stayed on silent. Their missed calls piled up like unanswered debts. But outside of the chaos they'd caused, something unexpected was happening. Life was moving forward for me. The Monday after the ceremony, my department chair called to tell me I'd been recommended for a position in a local startup that specialized in educational technology. It was the kind of role I dreamed about, creative, meaningful, and offering a salary that could finally get me out of the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. The interview was scheduled for Wednesday, and when I walked in, portfolio in hand, I was a different person from the one sitting in that cafe with Lisa just days earlier. I was focused, composed, and maybe even a little sharper from the quiet anger still simmering beneath the surface. By Friday, I had the offer in writing, more than I'd been making in both my jobs combined. Once I had that offer letter, something in me settled. It was like standing on solid ground for the first time in years. My frozen account was still in limbo, but I knew I had an incoming paycheck that would dwarf what they'd taken from me. And that meant I could think clearly, plan carefully, and not make a single move out of desperation. That's when the shift started. not just financially, but socially. Lisa, proud as ever, told some of her friends about my graduation and new job. Word spread through her circle, and suddenly I was getting congratulatory emails from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old classmates messaged me saying they'd seen my name mentioned in a local alumni newsletter. It wasn't viral fame, but it was enough to make me realize something crucial. My story was starting to exist without my family in it. I started showing up differently. At work, I volunteered for projects that put me in front of important clients. I reconnected with a few professors who offered to write me glowing references for future opportunities. I even started a small side project, a blog, sharing tips for students balancing school and work that began picking up traction faster than I expected. And the more my life began to expand, the more their world seemed to shrink. I saw it in small ways at first. Matt stopped posting pictures from Vegas. My mom's Facebook went unusually quiet. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. They were dealing with something, and I had a pretty good idea what. The bank finally called with good news. The investigation had concluded and the charges were confirmed as fraudulent. My account was restored. The stolen funds returned in full. They wouldn't tell me the details about who was responsible. Privacy laws, they said, but I didn't need the confirmation. I already knew. The old version of me might have taken the win and let it go. But the new version of me, the one with a stable income, growing connections, and a public reputation that was quietly gaining weight, that version wasn't in a rush. I could afford to wait, to watch, to plan every step with precision. Because if there's one thing I learned in these last few weeks, it's that power doesn't always come from money or status. Sometimes it comes from knowing you can drop the truth at the exact moment it will cause the most damage and watching the ripple spread. And my moment was coming. I could feel it. It was almost 2 weeks after graduation when the real opportunity presented itself. By then, I had slipped into a rhythm. New job training during the day, blog writing in the evenings, quiet observation of my family's slow unraveling in between. I wasn't pushing anything. I was letting the pieces fall where they naturally wanted to go. The opening came from a place I didn't expect: my new company's legal department. We were in a meeting about data privacy and fraud prevention when one of the senior legal advisors, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Karen, gave a presentation on how businesses handle internal theft and financial disputes. She mentioned that while banks have to keep certain case details private, victims can access specific records through a legal request if the fraud was tied to a crime reported in public media. The moment she said that, it was like a switch flipped in my mind. The Vegas incident had been all over the news. That meant those records, the ones linking my stolen funds directly to the people in that hotel suite, could potentially be accessed by me. Not just vague suspicions, not just assumptions, actual documented proof. That night, I started researching. I found out that because the Vegas police had made public statements about the raid, I could file a request under Nevada's public records law. If the documents connected the fraudulent card charges to the police report, I'd have everything I needed, not just to confirm it for myself, but to show anyone else who might doubt it. While I was piecing that together, life kept handing me more leverage. My blog's audience was growing faster than I'd planned. A well-known education influencer shared one of my posts on Twitter, and overnight, my follower count doubled. Suddenly, I wasn't just some recent graduate trying to figure things out. I was being invited to speak on student webinars, collaborate on articles, and contribute to online panels. My name was starting to mean something in circles my family couldn't touch. That visibility mattered for one reason. Anything I said now carried more weight. If I shared a story about financial betrayal or exploitation, people would listen, and they wouldn't just dismiss it as family drama. They'd see it as a cautionary tale, as advice from someone who'd been through it and come out stronger. And here's the thing about my family. They're obsessed with image. My mom lives for Facebook likes. Matt thrives on being the center of attention at family gatherings. And my dad's pride is tied up in the illusion that we're all a picture-perfect unit. They can ignore me in private, but they hate looking bad in public. So as I drafted the public records request, I started thinking bigger. This didn't have to be a one-step move. It could be a chain reaction. I could time the release of the proof with a story that would ripple through both my growing audience and our extended family. The same people they tried to poison against me before graduation. By the end of that week, the request was filed, the paperwork neatly documented, and my online presence stronger than it had ever been. I was in no rush. The longer I waited, the more their silence would gnaw at them, the more desperate their calls would get, and the more it would eat away at that carefully polished image they'd worked so hard to protect. All I had to do was wait for the envelope that would arrive in the mail. The one that would give me the final piece I needed to turn their Vegas getaway into something they'd never live down. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Plain manila, no frills, just my name typed neatly in the center. I took it inside, set it on my kitchen table, and stared at it for a good minute before opening it. Inside was exactly what I'd been waiting for: the official Vegas police incident report. The language was dry, but the details were everything. The report confirmed that my debit card number had been used to book the luxury suite. It listed the date and time of each transaction, matching perfectly with the charges on my bank statement. It even included surveillance stills from the hotel lobby showing my mom, dad, and Matt checking in. At the bottom, under card holder contacted, there was my name in the notation. Confirmed unauthorized use. Provided statement, it was irrefutable. They hadn't just borrowed my card like Matt tried to frame it. They'd committed fraud, and now it was sitting in black and white in my hands. I didn't rush. That night, I drafted a post for my blog. Not a direct, "here's my family's dirty laundry" kind of post, but a carefully written piece titled, "When the People You Trust Exploit You." My graduation week story, I wrote about the emotional side: first, the missed ceremony, the family's absence, the bank account frozen at the worst possible time. I kept it personal, raw, and honest. Then, toward the end, I transitioned into the facts. I laid out the timeline, the charges, and without using their names, described the hotel raid that had been on the local news. I embedded one of the grainy stills from the public report. It didn't need to be crystal clear. Anyone who knew them would recognize them instantly, and anyone who didn't know them personally would still feel the punch of the story. The next morning, I hit publish. The reaction was immediate. My followers flooded the comments with support. People shared their own stories of betrayal of family members who'd taken advantage of them. The post got picked up by a popular personal finance blog that linked back to my site, calling it a powerful reminder that financial abuse can happen anywhere, even within your own home. Within hours, I started getting texts from extended relatives I hadn't heard from in years. "Is this about your family? I can't believe they do this to you. I saw the pictures. I'm so sorry." Then came the fallout on their end. Matt's Instagram went dark. My mom deleted her Facebook entirely. A mutual cousin told me there had been a screaming match at my parents' house. My dad accusing me of trying to ruin the family's name. My mom insisting they never thought it would go this far. Apparently, a few of their friends had already called them out after recognizing them in the still shot from the report. But the part that satisfied me most wasn't the social media silence or the angry voicemails. It was the quiet shift in tone from the very people who dismissed me before. Aunts and uncles who once repeated my mom's too sensitive narrative were now openly saying things like, "You've been through a lot and handled it with grace." Lisa Ever, the cheerleader, told me, "You didn't even have to name them. You just showed the truth and let people see it for what it was." And that's exactly what I'd wanted. No screaming matches, no dramatic confrontations, just the undeniable facts presented to the world in a way they couldn't control or spin. By the end of that week, I had more job offers in my inbox, more speaking requests for my blog, and more messages of support than I could keep up with. Meanwhile, they were stuck in damage control, scrambling to salvage their reputations. And the best part, I still hadn't said their names. That was the power move. They knew I could if I wanted to, and now they had to live with the fact that I might. The silence from my family didn't last long. By the second week after I'd posted the story, the pressure had boiled over. Word had spread far beyond our circle. Parents at Matt's kids' school were whispering. Neighbors were making offhand comments about Vegas. And even some of my mom's church friends had reached out to me privately to say they were praying for me. The first crack came when Matt's job called him in for a conversation. He'd been up for a promotion at the small real estate office where he worked, but after a client recognized him from the photo in my blog post and mentioned it to management, the promotion disappeared. A few weeks later, so did his job. My mom was next. She'd been volunteering as the treasurer for a local community group, the same group she bragged about constantly. The board voted to remove her after members expressed concerns about trustworthiness. Lisa told me my mom cried in the parking lot for 20 minutes before driving off. My dad took the longest to feel the impact, but when it came, it was brutal. His company relied heavily on word-of-mouth business, and several longtime clients quietly pulled their contracts. A couple even cited recent family controversies as the reason. It wasn't enough to ruin him financially, but it left a dent in his pride that I knew would never fully heal. They tried reaching out again, this time with apologies. Half-hearted ones. My mom sent a long message about how families should forgive each other. Matt texted me that he'd learned his lesson, and my dad suggested we move past this. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I sent them each a single email with the police report attached. No subject line, no message in the body, just the proof in case they ever wanted to pretend it didn't happen. Life moved on for me quickly after that. My job flourished. My blog became a reliable source of income, and I eventually moved into a bigger apartment in a better part of town. I built a circle of friends who celebrated my wins without trying to diminish them, who showed up when they said they would. As for my family, I heard through the grapevine that they still don't talk about Vegas. They tell people it was a misunderstanding. But the people who matter know the truth. And they know it because I made sure of it without screaming, without threats, without lowering myself to their level. I didn't need to destroy them. I just had to hold up a mirror and let them watch themselves fall apart. And the best part, every time they look in that mirror, they'll see me standing there, cap gown and the diploma they didn't bother to show up.